You can combine them probably.
Okay. Do you want to start with any questions or anything? Some of you have been here for the earlier sessions. If there's anything you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I do have one question.
Okay, good.
And there is always connection between Jivatma is the individual soul. Paramatma is the universal soul. There is always connection between Jivatma and Paramatma by what is known as the silver cord. And silver cord, it is not a physical cord, it is some type of energy. Then, coming back to the Jivatma, mind is a faculty of Jivatma. If I'm, please correct me if I am wrong. And there are several parts of mind, and let us say the selfishness or greediness or goodness, badness, they are all faculties of the mind. And the consciousness, is it a faculty of the mind or the faculty of the soul? That is my question.
Okay. There are lots of elements to your question. So let me start by saying that there are a variety of different interpretations of what we mean by jiva. This is one of the most highly controversial concepts that we have in Vedanta, and the difference between the three main schools of Vedanta basically turn on this question of how do we interpret a jiva. What is the relationship between this Jivatman and Paramatman? So the dualists will say that the Jivatman and Paramatman, that one comes from the other, that they're similar in nature, but they're separate and different. The qualified non-dualists will say that all of the jivas form parts, that if we take the sum total of all of them, we'll get Paramatman or Ishvara. The non-dualists, they're the most radically different of all of them. They'll say that there's no cord connecting the two of them because there's only one. So they'll give the illustration of if we have a jar, this jar will represent this physical body and the mind and all of the coverings, this panchakosha idea, these different annamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnana, pranamaya kosha, all of that. But inside, there's the space inside that jar, the space inside another jar. What is the relationship between the space inside that jar and all of space? So we can say that the space inside the jar is part of the larger space. It's similar to it in nature. Or we can say that once we get rid of that jar, we eliminate the jar, we realize that there was no special meaning to this concept of space inside the jar. There's only infinite space. And there's no real distinction between the jiva and Brahman itself. This is called Ghatakasha and Mahakasha. Ghatakasha, the space inside the Ghata, inside the jar, and Mahakasha. So they won't talk about what is the relationship between jiva and Paramatman or Brahman. They'll say that jiva in reality is nothing but Brahman, and that these coverings that we have give the appearance that there's separation. This is Advaita Vedanta. But the other schools of Vedanta will give some more reality to the jiva, that there are individual jivas and everything, and we can say that mind and the senses, all of this, that these are the attributes or qualifiers for that jiva. But consciousness itself belongs only to Brahman. So even if we accept the reality of the individual, that we reflect that light of consciousness. So the light belongs to the sun. Everything else can reflect that light of the sun. We can have different containers of water. We'll see that reflected light in each one. The sun will appear in each one. But the source is something transcendent. So consciousness is something absolute. The mind can receive consciousness, can reflect consciousness, can function because of consciousness. we may say that electricity is everywhere, but it can only function if the apparatus is there. If we have the wiring and we have the connections and all of that, then we can plug it in, we can have a light bulb and it can shine. That doesn't mean that energy isn't everywhere. So this consciousness may be all-pervading, but it's the mind which can catch it, the mind which can reflect it, can utilize it. So this consciousness is very intimately connected with mind, but mind isn't the source of consciousness. Consciousness isn't an attribute of mind. Consciousness is something absolute. So this is why consciousness, prajnanam, this is one of the definitions of Brahma. Is that Brahman is pure consciousness itself. It has no cause. That means it's absolute. It doesn't require anything else to explain its existence. So it's Swayam Siddha, Swayam Prakasha. It shines by its own light. We see the light of the moon because of the sun. We don't need a second light in order to see the light of the sun. So consciousness doesn't require a mind or anything else. Consciousness is absolute that way.
Well, coming back, you mentioned about the bodies. We have got different bodies, and the physical body, it is also called the Sthula Sharira, and there are two parts in the physical body. One is the visible part and the other is the invisible part. The visible part is called the Sthula Sharira and the invisible part is called the Sukshma Sharira or the etheric double. Now, then when we die, we just cast off the Sthula Sharira or the physical body. We have got different bodies like astral body or Kama Sharira, mental body or Mans Sharira, or causal body or Karana Sharira. In the process of incarnation, we go through different stages. So we just, when we die, we just get rid of this physical body, but still we will be having the other bodies. And after 20 or 30 years, maybe we can cast off the next astral body or the Kama Sharira. Then the Mans Sharira also it will take. But the causal body or the Karana Sharira, that will be remaining forever. That is the one which is going to reincarnate. That is my understanding. So if I am not correct, please correct me, Swami.
I don't know about all these other bodies. We have only talk about three. The Sthula Sharira, the Sukshma Sharira, and the Karana Sharira, the causal body. Everything else is right. When we get rid of this physical body, then this causal body is made up of the mind and the intellect and all of that. We don't know exactly what that means. It's not exactly that we have the same mind that we have now and that we're aware of everything. We have this idea a little bit that whatever the main thrust of somebody's life is, all of the samskaras, that they come together like, it's kind of like a vector theory. Right? Vector theory is that you have forces and all with a different velocity from different angles, and they all come together, and you can turn all of these different things into one single one. So it's something like that. At the time of death, everything comes together. Whatever is the most important part of our life, with that main thrust, that will somehow remain in some type of potential state. This is all highly speculative. We don't really understand this process at all. Swami Parameshanananda, one of our great Swamis, I've referred to him many times. He has this idea, it must be from some scripture or something, that the first year is a type of year of forgetfulness. So that this is why when we're reborn we don't remember generally the past life, that it's something like a sleep state. So what is it that's reborn? What's reborn will have some of these samskaras, and a lot of what we take with us gets used up in the particular birth that we have. So if our desire is to lead a spiritual life, That not necessarily that we'll be born will have exactly that same desire, but that desire will manifest itself in the type of family that we're born into. The Gita is very clear about this, that those who lead a very spiritual life, that they have the desire for God realization, but they don't succeed in that life. They'll be born in a certain family, very good, prosperous family, or even a higher birth is a family of great yogis. So we have this idea. So this Karan Sharira will perhaps contain the memory of past lifetimes, which is generally not available to us, but could be there. So there are some people who can remember. Swami Vivekananda himself was asked about that. Do you remember your past lives? And he said yes. And we have this idea that before God realization, that somehow the memory comes back and we realize we've done something over and over again, we've done it. The Buddhist scriptures, of course, the Buddha remembered all of his past lifetimes, there's Jataka tales and everything. But this all belongs to Aparavidya. The Mundaka Upanishad, it makes a very important distinction between what is Paravidya, what is the higher knowledge, and what is Aparavidya. That which is also important but speculative. It is not absolute and can change with the times. Our understanding can grow and we can understand things more clearly. The only thing that belongs to Paravidya is what is that knowing which everything is known. What is the nature of Brahman? What is the nature of reality? What is the nature of the self? Everything else, what happens after death, what happens to the individual soul, all of that. We rely a little bit on scriptures, we rely a little bit on what these great souls have said, but we don't know anything for certain. Swami Vivekananda himself says that it's a working hypothesis, the best explanation that we know of at the time, at present. We may have a clearer understanding of it in the future, but I myself don't bother about it too much. If we take care of everything in this lifetime, we don't have to worry about anything else. Nahi kalyana krit kaschit durgatim tatagachati. This is enough for me. The Gita says, if you lead a good life, don't worry. Nothing bad will happen to you. For me, that's enough. I don't have to know, do I go to this loka, that loka? Will I remember my birth? Will I be taking with me some samskaras, new things, old things? I don't bother with all that.
Well, talking about this mind, my understanding is there are three divisions: subconscious mind, conscious mind, and superconscious mind. Whatever we do, the essence of all our actions is always stored in the subconscious mind. And when we die, there must be some type of mechanism. We carry this mind also for the next incarnation. Otherwise, some people are rich, some people are poor. So everything has been stored in the subconscious mind that will come back again in the next incarnation, depending upon the type of the actions we did in the previous incarnations. And it might go to several incarnations. And of course, Edgar Cayce, so he lived in 1940s. He was, it will go to several incarnations. In fact, there was one continent, and they were all very highly educated, and they misused their own knowledge, and therefore, that continent was drowned. And some people went to east and some people went to west. And according to them, so they misused their energies. So that is the reason some people are very good, some people are very bad.
Anyhow, this topic is not of so much interest for everybody.
Okay.
And really, what I said before is we have an opportunity in this lifetime to lead a spiritual life, to call on God, to try to get rid of all of our imperfections, all of that. We shouldn't worry too much about what happens afterwards or what happened before. And Edgar Cayce, he did a lot of very interesting things. Other people have done interesting. This binds us to this idea that we're individuals. This idea that what was I in a past life, what will I be in a future life, is a type of bondage. We're trying to realize our divine nature. We're one with God. There's a very negative type of thinking. If we get wrapped up in this idea of what was I in a past lifetime, if we get too involved with this idea of reincarnation, we're trying to see this Gita, we're trying to realize I was never born, I never die. This is the truth that we learn in Gita. This is the absolute. This is the Paravidya. This is more important. We can really get stuck if we get too involved. Then we get into psychic things and this Theosophical Society thing and these Mahatmas and all of that. So it's really is a curiosity thing for most people. But we really shouldn't worry about it. We lead a good life. If we lead a good life, then whatever happens, happens. We accept it that way.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I have a question is that when you said that subconscious mind or superconscious mind, are this scientifically proven? Are those scientific terminology, or many people try to I have seen many yogi on YouTube or many videos that try to
okay, now I did my very best to divert our conversation away from this, and you're trying to bring it back. Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up on all this.
But really, it goes back to this idea that we cling to our individuality, and we don't have any concept that we can have that this is the source of bondage, and that there can be this tremendous mind of joy and bliss that comes from realizing that I am not this individual, that this sense of I is false. And here we're clinging to it. I wanted to continue in the next lifetime in a different way and everything, and it's false. The ego is the main obstacle. This ego is just this conception that we have of who and what we are. It has no substance to it. And if we can completely change that our way of thinking, then we'll see that there's a great burden has been lifted from us. We read the Gospels from Ramakrishna, he almost never talks about these things. Every once in a while that they'll ask about reincarnation and everything, he'll say, yes, something like that is written in Gita and everything. He doesn't talk about it very much. Samskaras, he'll say, you have to accept that someone has good samskaras that way. Even, M didn't believe in reincarnation. He didn't believe in the avatar. Many of the Western educated ones, and so he asked Ramakrishna, will it be harmful for me if I don't believe in these things? He says, it's enough if you believe that everything is possible in the realm of God. He said, that's enough. But then sometimes he would say, you have to admit that some of these devotees, they have very good samskaras. They were born with very good qualities and things. He said, yes, that much. So that's enough. That's enough. We shouldn't get too involved in these things. Okay, let me go to the topic that I had, because it really kind of ties together the weekend retreat. It goes very much to this idea of the state of vijnana. And I think it was Kunal who was asking yesterday, was this an original idea? This idea of seeing God everywhere, or this, and I mentioned that we find it in some of the Ram Prasad, some of the other things, but it's also a Sufi idea. And we find this in one of the songs that is sung repeatedly in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. This "Tujh se humne dil ko lagaya, jo kuch hai sab tu hi hai." Yeah, this is that song that I have joined my heart to thee, all that exists art thou. It's a very interesting song, because when Sri Ramakrishna heard it, he fell in love with the song. And this song, in many respects, represents his main attitude, spiritual attitude. It combines this non-dualistic idea of oneness with a devotional idea. So we can also see that it doesn't have to be that everything is simply, the manifestation of Brahman or pure consciousness. That this is the beloved come in this form. Well, it doesn't say all that exists is Brahman, all that exists art thou. So a very beautiful conception. So I wanted to go through a little bit of the history of this song also.
What was that song again, Maharaj?
It's called, well, the English version is All That Exists Art Thou. Tujhse humne dil ko lagaya, jo kuch hai sab tu hi hai. It's Hindi, actually Urdu. It's actually Urdu. So, sometimes hard to tell the difference between the two. That we can tell by the vocabulary, and we know the author of it. So,
Hafiz.
Huh?
Hafiz.
No. There's someone. The name is Zafar.
Zafar.
Yeah. Zafar.
Sufi tradition.
Well, I'll go into that a little bit because we don't know too much about this thing. But anyhow, so this song is found in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, being sung on 3 different occasions. And that means that probably it was sung on many, many occasions, because M was only there on weekends, and there was a time whenever Narendra was there, that he would sing this song. It became really a favorite song for Sri Ramakrishna of all the songs, and we know how much he loved these Ram Prasad songs and other things. So, when we go to the Gospel, page 794 is the first recorded mention of the song. This is at Ram's house. Ram was, of course, a great devotee, householder devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. This is June 13th, 1885. And this date is significant for one other reason, that this is the first time that we find reference to Sri Ramakrishna's illness. This is the first time where he starts saying that he didn't feel very well, that he had a little sore throat, that he was having trouble swallowing, and of course later this was diagnosed as cancer. So this is the first time, June 13th, 1885. But still, he was speaking to all of the devotees, and it didn't stop him. Later we know there were times when he could almost not talk. At this time, so he's talking to all the devotees there, and this Trailokyanath Sanyal and Joy Gopal Sen arrived. These were members of the Brahmo Samaj. The relationship between Sri Ramakrishna and the Brahmos was very interesting, because Keshav loved Sri Ramakrishna without any reservation, and Thakur loved him equally that way. There were others who respected him and sometimes, saw his greatness. Other times thought that he was a little uncouth, that they thought that he was a little bit crazy, that he was a little bit too unorthodox, all sorts of things. So there were different levels that way. Some of them actually were very critical later. This Pratap Majumdar, he caused so much trouble for Swamiji. He also came to Chicago and everything. But this Trailokyanath, Thakur was very fond of him, and he seemed to be very fond of Sri Ramakrishna, and he was the main songwriter for the Brahmo Samaj. Of course, somebody by the name of Rabindranath Tagore also wrote a few songs and became a little bit famous, probably more famous than Trailokyanath. But he was a very gifted singer and a gifted writer, and Sri Ramakrishna loved his songs very much. So very often he would sing his own songs, and his writing was very much influenced by Sri Ramakrishna. That Amai Dema Pagal Gore, Mother make me mad with thy love. This is something that he never would have written before he met Sri Ramakrishna. So everything kind of changed. The nature before that, it was all kind of impersonal and watered down and everything. And so this is something that he got directly from Sri Ramakrishna. On that day, he happened to sing this particular song, written by someone definitely from the Sufi tradition. And the language, of course, sounds like Urdu, Hindi, Urdu combination or something like that. And M in the Gospel records this by putting down the first couple of lines. Now, if you go through the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you'll find that M's habit was, the first time a song is sung, he writes the whole thing out. Then the second or third time he'll just put the first few lines of it. In this case, he just wrote the first few lines, and later we get the whole thing, which leads me to believe that perhaps he wasn't familiar with the song. And Sri Ramakrishna also wasn't familiar with the song. It was something that he had never heard before, but Thakur was charmed when he heard it. Thakur knew Hindi, so he would have been able to understand the Urdu and everything. It's very interesting that sometimes the sadhus would come, he would have conversations with them in Hindi and have to translate it into Bengali for the devotees there. Yeah. And he also could understand Sanskrit. He used to say, I can't speak it, but when the Pandits come and the sadhus come and speak in Sanskrit, I can understand it. So he was very good with language that way. When he was young, he used to visit all of these sadhus. Most of the sadhus in those days were from North India and would speak Hindi. So somehow he could understand this Hindi. Now the second time we hear of this song is October 24th, 1885. And this time it's Narendra, Swami Vivekananda, who is singing it. And this time Sri Ramakrishna asked him to sing it. So obviously he had heard it before. He had heard Narendra singing this. He knew that song. So this is the second time we know about it, but he must have heard it on other occasions. And we can assume that by now Thakur loved this song. So it was one of his favorite songs. And then we find him requesting Narendra to sing it one final time. This is April 22nd, 1886, so very close to the end of his life. And this is in the Kashipur Garden House where Sri Ramakrishna had been moved. And here M gives the entire song in the original form for the first and only time in the Bengali version, Kothamrit. Now, each time that Sri Ramakrishna heard this song, it was very clear, he becomes very much moved and talks about this song. So it was something very, very significant for him. In the first occasion, after the song, and another time, he went into an ecstatic state. He became overwhelmed with emotion. Again and again he said, thou art all, thou art all, this art thou. And we read in the great master, the Lila Pashango, that after this, whenever Narendra would sing songs, sometimes he would sing song after song after song after song. At the end of it, when he was finished, Sri Ramakrishna would say, now sing that one. And it must have been a regular habit. He never even had to mention the title of it. That he knew exactly what he meant, and he would sing this song, All That Exists Art Thou, and then Thakur would be satisfied. So it plays a very significant role in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, this song, and the mood and the teaching that we find in this song. So, Tuchh se humne dil ko lagaya, jo kuch hai, sab aur so tu hi hai. The English translation, I'll read. This is the translation given in Swami Nikhilananda's Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The songs that we find in the Gospel, the English translation, these were done by someone who was for some time a monk under him. His name was John Moffat. Later he left and I think became a Catholic monk or something. But Swami Nikhilananda explained the meaning of the song and then gave him some freedom. So the translations of the songs are a little bit free and poetical that we find. So this is the version that we find. I've joined my heart to thee. All that exists art thou. Thee only have I found, for thou art all that exists. O Lord, beloved of my heart, thou art the home of all. Where indeed is the heart in which thou dost not dwell. Thou hast entered every heart. All that exists art thou. Whether sage or fool, whether Hindu or Mussulman, thou makest them as thou wilt. All that exists art thou. So we see that a lot of these ideas that Thakur loves so much, this very liberal teaching, that a Hindu, Muslim, all are going towards the same goal, worshipping the same. We find that in the Sufi tradition also. Then, thy presence is everywhere, whether in heaven or in Kaaba. Before thee all must bow, for thou art all that exists. From earth below to the highest heaven, from heaven to deepest earth, I see thee wherever I look. All that exists art thou. Pondering, I have understood. I have seen it beyond a doubt. I find not a single thing that may be compared to thee. To Zafar it has been revealed that thou art all that exists. So we know the name of the poet. Probably there was one Zafar who was considered to be the last Mughal emperor of India, and he was also known to be very liberal. And Sufi Akbar, there were many of them that were quite liberal at that time. So probably this was that same last Mughal emperor of India by the name of Zafar, and the tradition that he represented is also an old early tradition in India. There was during this Renaissance period in India, where we have Nanak and Kabir, Tulsidas, all of that, especially the devotional movements. Many of these devotional movements were very anti-caste, anti-prejudice and separation and everything. It was a very wonderful period. So we find that this Sufi tradition was very free from this orthodoxy and this narrowness and fanatical element that we find in other religious traditions. And we find that they were great mystics. So they also, like the mystics in other religions, they had this special vision. They could see the divine everywhere. They would have mystical experiences. They would do all sorts of spiritual practices. So they saw spirituality in very universal terms, God dwelling equally in all beings, in all places. And that means equally in the church, in the temple, in the synagogue, in the mosque, all of that, a very common theme that we have there. This combination of a Hindu and Muslim, probably the most famous example that we have is Kabir. We know the story of Kabir. Kabir belonged to the Weaver caste. It was not really caste. They were the Weaver communities, basically the Muslim community in Benares. Even now, they're renowned for their weaving and everything. It's interesting, this Amjad, who was the dacoit, who was Holy Mother's disciple, that they were also from that type of community. And what happened was the British were so intent on selling their own cloth in India that at one time they burned down all the mulberry trees so that they couldn't get the silk anymore to make cloth. So they couldn't do anything, so they had to turn to becoming dacoits and things like that. But anyhow, so this idea that Hindu and Muslim and Mecca and Kashi, all of this, that these are together in the same thought. This is something that we can say goes back at least to the 15th century, probably much earlier, in the life of Kabir. This Kabir, somehow he developed this tremendous devotion for a very great saint by the name of Ramananda. And he practically begged him to initiate him, to make him his disciple. And for some reason this Ramananda was hesitating about that. And the story is that this Kabir, he hit upon a plan. He knew that this Ramananda went for the bath in the Ganga early morning when it was still dark out, and he knew exactly the steps that he walked down. So he laid his body on one of the steps there, and when this Ramananda came, and his foot touched his body, and as soon as Ramananda felt that he was touching something, he immediately said, Ram Ram, like that. So this Kabir said, you've given me your holy touch, you've given me the mantra, and I'm your disciple now. So, really he is one of the greatest composers of bhajans in India. We had this singer, this Subhadra Desai. She's come now 3 different times to us. She's a very wonderful singer, and she's based in Delhi. And she sings a lot of these Kabir songs. She is beautiful, gorgeous songs. Then, so this Kabir, all of his songs are with that type of theme. God dwelling equally in Kaaba, equally in Kashi, that kind of thing. And he was equally beloved by the Hindu community and Muslim community. And the story of his death is also very interesting. That when he died, they covered his body with a cloth. The Muslims wanted to bury him, the Hindus wanted to cremate him. So they're arguing over the whole thing and everything. Who will have be able to take the body, and each one with great reverence. There are two different traditions. So then Kabir somehow appeared before them and said, lift the shroud, lift the cloth covering the body, and they lifted it. They saw there were just flowers there. So the Hindu community took half of them, the Muslim community took the other half. Some were buried and some were consigned to the fire. So this is a very important period in India where we find these great bhakti figures, Chaitanya Dev, Mirabai, Tulsidas, Surdas, Guru Nanak. And all of them stress this non-orthodox tradition. They stress the love of God has nothing to do with caste or creed. The Chaitanya Deva, you'll meet all these Bengalis by the name of Das. Yes. Yeah. So that whether they're originally Brahmin or Shudra, no one will know. They all say we're all the same. We're all the servant of God that way. In Guru Nanak, you'll find that all of them, they'll sing him or they'll. So they didn't believe in these distinctions, and this is something that Sri Ramakrishna also said when we read in the Gospel that he says that there's no caste among devotees of God. He gets this from Chaitanya Deva. This is one of the teachers. Thakur got so much from Chaitanya Deva, and from all of the other. He was such a student of history, and all of those who went before him. He had such a reverence for all of the early traditions that way. So this Zafar, whoever he was, we can say in general belongs to this type of tradition. That at least the sentiments that we find in this song could have been written by Kabir, really. When we read the words of that, and when we read the writings of other Sufis, Rumi and some others, we see also that they're very universal and very liberal that way. Now, in 19th century India, even with the Brahmo Samaj, someone like Trailokyaнаth, that they would know a song like this was not something very surprising, because there was great reverence in those days for the Sufi poetry and even Persian. We know that Swamiji's father, he learned Persian. He loved all of these songs. Hafiz especially was his favorite poet. So it's not terribly surprising that they would know that. And we have in our possession now the original old songbooks that they had for the Brahmo Samaj. So it's called Brahma Sangeet and Sankirtana, and this is one of the songs there. So this is something that the Brahma members also would have known and would have sung. We generally think that they're doing all these Upanishadic things and other Tagore songs and everything, but this is also included there. And Swamiji, of course, was as a member of the Brahmo Samaj. He would have learned this song eventually. He would have heard it probably there. Now, the relationship between Hindus and Muslims in those days was very different. I made reference to this yesterday also, how in Swamiji's boyhood, how there were so many Muslim friends that he had, and they would go to their house and break the fast with them at Eid, and the others would come and celebrate Durga Puja with them. And of course, Sri Ramakrishna, he practiced Islamic sadhana, again with the Sufi tradition. It's what was his name? Govinda Roy. He was, of course, originally Hindu, probably Brahmin Hindu. Roy, we don't know for sure. But in any case, he followed this Sufi tradition. And he gave Sri Ramakrishna some type of initiation, and he practiced that. And of course, had the vision of Muhammad and everything, and always said that this is also a path, that Muhammad was he had a vision of Muhammad. So that Muhammad, he didn't call him an incarnation, but still as a great prophet and founder of the religion. So Sri Ramakrishna had great reverence for Islam, and there wasn't that type of tension between the communities at that time. It was really partitioned. It spoiled everything. That was the worst thing that happened in India. Now, I want to go to the significance of the song, the meaning of the song, and how this really echoes so much of what we spoke about yesterday, with this idea of Bhavamukha, going to that state where one sees God everywhere, manifest everywhere. So it was the experience of Sri Ramakrishna, but it's something that was written about by these Sufis also, that there must have been Sufi saints who had these direct realizations that way. Now, one of the main themes here is, what is the nature of this external world that we see? So we can say that this is just transitory, it's not of great value, that we want to realize the self within, that this is something that we falsely identify with, we get attached to, we don't pay too much attention to it. If we're really thinking about the essential teachings of Vedanta, the essential teaching has to do with the real nature of the self. This external universe, we may have different theories about it. We may say it's constantly changing, we don't get attached. We may say it's like a mirage, we may say it's like a dream. And I used to think sometimes that why do we make such a fuss over, because we can't know for certain. How much can we say about this external universe? Why do we make such a fuss? If we see God dwelling within all beings, that's okay. But do we really need to have this understanding that everything is pure consciousness? It's very tough to try to understand what that means. That this what looks like made out of wood is made out of consciousness. What does that mean to us? It's very difficult to say. Right? So I used to wonder sometimes, this is kind of speculative, it doesn't make too much a difference in everything. But when we see these great realized souls, how everything becomes so sacred to them when they have this vision, and a source of such joy and such bliss that they feel that they're seeing God wherever they look, then we understand that this is a tremendous way to live in the world, a tremendous eye-opener, tremendous type of vision that we have. So Sri Ramakrishna, he used to see that. He saw everything as the embodiment of the divine. And we'll see in many different ways he would talk about that. So, this statement, all that exists art thou, I want to just look at this briefly from two different points of view. The first is from this Vedantic or impersonal point of view, and the second from a devotional point of view. Because as I said before, this Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, this basically from a metaphysical point of view covers that. All that exists is nothing but Brahman, is the divine. That we think we're seeing a snake, we're actually seeing the rope, not knowing that it's a rope. We're seeing nothing but Brahman, but we don't realize it. So we have this idea in the Upanishads, this Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, this is the main one that we have, and it's explained in so many different ways that it's like jewelry made of gold. That what distinguishes one piece of jewelry from another is only Namarupa, name and form. That this gold will take the shape of a bracelet or an anklet or an earring, and we'll give it a different name and everything. But what is the essential nature of it? It's gold. This was a very apt illustration in ancient India. Even today, there are still places in India where people will put all their money into gold buying gold jewelry for the wife. And the value of it has absolutely nothing to do with the shape or the form or the name or anything like that. In fact, they can just go and melt it down and it'll turn it into something else. You want to know the value of it, you weigh it, because the value is only the gold. The name and the form are secondary, right? Yeah, even now, India is and they have to import it, but they buy more gold and gold jewelry than any place in the world. I saw something on 60 Minutes once.
Largest consumer.
Largest consumer of gold. So this is a very apt illustration that why does everything not look like pure consciousness if it's all the same? Because of name and form. Somehow it's taking a different form and we call it by something else. So this is that Vedantic tradition that we have. This universe is superimposed on Brahman. The problem is our vision of it. It's not a question that it's changed in any way. This is our failure to see it with these divine eyes, these divya chakshus. Thakur used to say that also, that you need a divine sight to see these things that way. So this is one way of understanding this, the Vedantic point of view, and I mentioned many times yesterday, Shankaracharya didn't emphasize this as much. He emphasized more this neti idea, that this is all belongs to Maya, that it has no ultimate reality, and we don't want to get attached to it and everything. And the other idea is more this Bhavamukha, this Vijnana idea. After God realization, then vision changes and we see everything in a new light. So that's why in the Upanishads, all these Mahavakyas only have to do with the nature of the self or the nature of Brahman. And nothing with the nature of this manifest universe or the nature of Brahman and manifesting as the universe. A lot of these things we talked about yesterday. This how he interprets that as how was the concert?
Good.
Really? Did you do good? I would have liked to have seen it. For Shankaracharya traditional Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, this idea is more that we want to transcend this universe. Not so much see it as a Brahman, but somehow go to that state where we get merged in Brahman. This is that jnana state where we reach the roof. And that state of realization is one in which this universe itself can disappear. This great statement in this Vivek Chudamani is Kvagatam kutra anitam kenalinam idam jagat adhunaiva maya drishtam. Yes, I just saw it a second ago. Nastikim adbhutam. Is it possible? An incredible thing. Did it disappear? Doesn't it exist anymore? So this is a very interesting verse. The disciple, when he has his realization, said, "Well, where is it gone? Kwagadam, kutaralina. Where did it merge? Then Kena, who took it away? Where did it disappear?" The Swamiji had that same thing. Where's my body? I don't feel it. All of that. And then I just saw it a moment ago. It was here. It was so real to me. And now it's gone. So this is we get more of this type of emphasis there. And it was the experience of Sri Ramakrishna. It was the experience of Swamiji, but not the final experience. It's not this Vijnana experience, not the Bhavamukha state that way. So this Advaita Vedanta, the realization of the student is that Brahman alone is real, and that my real nature is that I am that Brahman. This is that manifestation, and what we say about this external universe, that is left to Sri Ramakrishna to develop that theory, because the seeing everything as a Brahman was not emphasized in this traditional Advaita Vedanta, even though it's actually more present in the Upanishads themselves. The Upanishads themselves, this idea that Brahman has become everything, which Ramakrishna said is a very dominant theme that we have there. So now it becomes a question of our own personal spiritual attitude. How we want to look upon this relationship between the Nitya and the Leela. Do we want to look upon it as the real and the unreal? Or do we want to look upon it as Nitya, that which is eternal and unchanging, and that which is the divine play of the Divine Mother, the sportive Mother, where she dwells within everything and she has become everything. So this is that state of mind that Sri Ramakrishna entered into, and this was his living experience that way. Now, this idea that this God, as a personal God, is manifesting in this universe. Not simply this impersonal Brahman covered by name and form appearing as this universe, but somehow the personal God manifesting in this universe is a very dominant theme in the Bhagavad Gita. We have a whole chapter where Sri Krishna talks about how we take that to mean is that Ishvara aspect, the personal God aspect, is manifest in the world. Even when it talks about this Sakshi, Kshetrajna, who is the Kshetrajna, who is the knower of the field, he'll say, Mam Viti, know that I'm the knower of the field. When he says, what is the very first manifestation of the divine? Aham Atma Gurakaishna. He says, I am the self. It's not saying that the Atman and Brahman are one and the same. It says, in my form as personal God, I dwell within, that way. That I am the one who makes people move about. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam, Hridaya, dwelling in the heart, as if they're just on a machine going around in a circle. So we have this idea that what in the Upanishads is restricted to the impersonal Brahman is also understood as a personal God. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, not Sarvam Kalvinam Brahma. Not that everything is Brahman, but Krishna himself says, yes, that this is the Jnani sees that God himself has become everything. So we can see how this is coming to Sri Ramakrishna's idea, the impersonal absolute, personal God are one and the same, so that we can see this universe as the manifestation of personal God, as a manifestation of Divine Mother, that way. Not simply impersonal Brahman, which makes it a little cold, and doesn't allow that devotional attitude, and doesn't allow us to say all that exists art thou. We can say all that exists is Brahman. But now we can say all that exists art thou, because it's the Krishna himself, or the Divine Mother herself, whatever our concept of is that personal God has become this entire universe. So Sri Ramakrishna, he lived in that realm, the Bhavamukha state. He lived in that realm where he saw everything as a manifestation of the divine, and he did it in different ways. Sometimes it was this impersonal absolute Brahman. So he would say, I see everything as pure consciousness, Chinmaya, or Chidghana. I like this idea of Chidghana. This idea that consciousness can somehow take some type of form. If we think of the air, very humid air, the monsoon season, which is invisible, it has all these air molecules and everything, there's moisture in it. Somehow, through some mysterious process, it'll form into a cloud. And this cloud from a distance looks like it's something that's substantial. But what is it? It is nothing but the air molecules with the moisture and everything, seen from a distance, giving the appearance of something physical. And when we fly through it in an airplane, we can see that we can go right through it. Not even cotton candy, not even just, it's almost like it's just air itself. What's the difference between the cloud and the air? Really no difference. So there's a Brahman which exists everywhere. He saw that everything was kind of a congealed form of consciousness. So he said to Keshav once, on attaining perfect knowledge, one sees only one consciousness everywhere. The same perfect knowledge again makes him realize that the one consciousness has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles. Then he was talking another time about divine love to M. And he said, attaining that love, the devotee sees everything full of spirit and consciousness. To him, Krishna is consciousness and his sacred abode is consciousness. Chinmay Sham, Chinmay Dham. The devotee too is consciousness. Everything is consciousness. So, Sri Ramakrishna at times saw everything as the manifestation of this impersonal Brahman, this pure consciousness, this reality, beyond everything changeful, beyond everything personal even. Then he would have this other vision where he saw everything as the manifestation of Ishvara, personal God, or Divine Mother. And this was something that became very prominent, especially towards the end of his life when he was in Kashipur. Even when he was in the midst of all that terrible suffering and everything, he would go into that state where he would see everything as the Divine Mother. So this is one of the last entries that we have in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where M is there and Thakur is talking to the devotees. And he said, do you know what I see right now? I see that it is God himself who has become all this. Not pure consciousness, God. Probably Ishwar in the original. It seems to me that man and other living beings are made of leather, and that it is God himself who, dwelling inside these leather cases, moves the hands, the feet, the heads. I had a similar vision once before when I saw houses, gardens, roads, men, cattle, all made of one substance. It was as if they were all made of wax. Then he makes a very wonderful, tremendous statement. Of course, this is when he knew that he wouldn't live much longer. And he said, I see that it is God himself who has become the block, the executioner, and the victim for the sacrifice. And then after that he went into Samadhi, and he came back, and he sees, I mentioned yesterday the incident with Latu. He says, there is Loto. He bends his head, resting it on the palm of his hand. I see that it is God himself who rests his hand on his head. So, Sri Ramakrishna, he would talk about this everything, the manifestation of consciousness. Then he would talk about this idea of God manifesting as everything. And then sometimes, in a very particular way, he would say that it's the Divine Mother herself. That means this Nirguna Saguna combination. Divine Mother herself, that Shakti aspect there. When he had his first vision of Mother Kali in the Kali temple, when he was priest there, one day he fed a cat with the offering of food. Mother Kali got in big trouble. All of the other priests said, oh, we'll get him fired now. They didn't like him very much. They wrote to Mathur and said he's really doing crazy things. Food was supposed to be offered to Mother Kali. He gave to a cat and everything. Mathur knew him. He said, don't say anything about Choto Pachajaji. He said, the young priest, that you leave it up to me. Don't bother anything. So Sri Ramakrishna later explained what happened. He said, the Divine Mother revealed to me in the Kali temple that it was she who had become everything. She showed me that everything was full of consciousness. So he's using both terms now. Everything is full of consciousness, but it's she, because she was the embodiment of consciousness. The image of Kali was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The water vessels were consciousness. The door sill was consciousness. All was consciousness. I found everything inside the room soaked, as it were, in bliss. So we get this personal aspect a little. The bliss of God. I saw a wicked man in front of the Kali temple, but in him I also saw the power of the Divine Mother vibrating. That is why I fed a cat with the food that was to be offered to the Divine Mother. I clearly perceived that all this was the Divine Mother, even the cat. There's a very beautiful song that Ram Prasad wrote, where he talks about this, that he sees everything as the embodiment of Mother, walking around the town, he's circumambulating mother, lying down to go to sleep, he's making pranam to mother, sleeping, he's meditating on mother. There's also a Sanskrit hymn by Shankaracharya with the same theme. Like that. Now, all of this is about the lines of the song, Jo kuch hai sab tu hai, but remember the beginning. I've joined my heart to thee. So this is also something that is extremely important, that through the devotional path we can reach this state where we see that everything is nothing but the manifestation of God. So these initial words, I've joined my heart to thee, gives the key to our understanding that those who follow a devotional path and have this vision of oneness will see oneness manifest in devotional terms also. Those who are jnanis, and their vision may be, yes, that I see nothing but Brahman, pure consciousness everywhere. Those who are devotional nature and follow a devotional path, they'll say, yes, this is my mother manifest that way. Even we go back to Purusha Suktam and everything. This whole universe is the body of God. It's a very ancient idea that we have, that Ramakrishna, for us, it's a beautiful idea. For him, it was a living reality. He lived in that state of consciousness. Now, the devotional mood that comes upon one and leads one to this realization, seeing God in everything, is based on the power of devotion to change this ego sense that we have. If we understand from a philosophical point of view that this false understanding of I, that this false identification of I with the ego, with the body and all of that is the main obstacle, then if from a devotional point of view we can eliminate this very earthy type of ego and make it a very divine type of ego, or even become completely forgetful of this ego in our love of God, then we'll attain to that state of oneness. There'll be nothing separating it. There'll be no more stick lying on the surface of the water to separate one side from the other. So the devotee also transcends the ego, becoming forgetful of God. So the love of God is so great. See Radha, she didn't care about herself. Of all the gopis, she was the only one who was happy when Krishna was happy. All of the others said, no, I want to be the one to make him happy. But she only cared about his happiness. She didn't think of herself. So this is at a highest state. Self-forgetfulness is a way of transcending this ego sense also. So one of Sri Ramakrishna's great teachings was that we have to get rid of this idea of I and constantly replace it with thou. So he told all of these stories that Naham, Naham, Tuhu, Tuhu. How the cow will constantly say Hamba, Hamba, which means I, and it has to go through so much suffering and has to be slaughtered and cut into pieces, and finally they'll take the tendons and things and they'll make the string out of it that's used for carding cotton, and then you've seen these carders, they'll walk down the street sometimes and they'll pluck it. So he says that only then, when there's a tu, thou, is there any nistar, any relief for the cow. So we have to completely get rid of this sense of I. Yeah, so he tells that story. The cow cries, Hamba, Hamba, that is I. That is why it suffers so much. It is yoked to the plow and made to work in rain and sun. Then it may be killed by the butcher. From his hide shoes are made, and also drums, which are mercilessly beaten. Still it does not escape suffering. At last strings are made out of its entrails for the bows used in carding cotton. Then it no longer says Hamba, Hamba, I, but Tuhu, Tuhu, thou. Only then are its troubles over. So in this devotional path, the devotee fully offers himself or herself to the beloved, so that the sense of distinction and sense of separation starts to gradually disappear. And the state of oneness is a little different. This I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, we say it's a state of oneness. It's actually more of a dualistic state. Still some sense of I and some sense of Brahman. When the devotee loses the sense of I completely, that's really oneness. So as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, sometimes I look within, I see Mother alone is there. That's really the highest state of, not even oneness. Oneness means that I am the same. This I completely disappears. God alone dwells within. For the lover, the beloved alone fills the whole mind and heart that way. So it's not exactly the same as the I am Brahman of the Jnani, but it's also a different type of merging in that reality where the sense of I completely vanishes. Swamiji gave a beautiful lecture in Madras called The Work Before Us, and he was talking about this some of the great Sufi poets, and he tells this wonderful story. He says there was an ancient Persian Sufi poet, and one of his poems says, I came to the beloved and beheld the door was closed. I knocked at the door, and from inside a voice came, who is there? I replied, I am. The door did not open. A second time I came and knocked at the door, and the same voice asked, who is there? It is I. The door did not open. A third time I came, and the same voice asked, who is there? I am thyself, my love. And the door opened. So this is that path of devotion which will lead to oneness, where the devotee feels no difference between himself and the object of love. There's another nice instance, similar thing. Swamiji was in Thousand Island Park. This is found in the Inspired Talks. And he said, when we know the self, then we understand. The highest expression of love is unification. Then he quoted from another Persian Sufi poem. Don't know who wrote it exactly, but he said, there was a time when I was a woman and he was a man. Still, love grew until there was neither he nor I. Only I remember faintly, there was a time when there were two, but love came between and made them one. So this is that path of devotion. This is what it means, the first part. I've joined my heart to thee, all that exists art thou. So we have these two things together. One is this perfect sense of oneness with the divine. Divine means with God. We feel no sense of separation whatsoever. This is the first part. Second part is that vision of the Jnani, where we see the divine, we see the beloved. We see the beloved everywhere. We see the face of the beloved in each and every individual. We see everything as a manifestation of the divine that way. So I thought this would be a nice way to close out this retreat topic of remain in Bhavamukha, because this was how Sri Ramakrishna lived. He saw that each and every individual was his beloved, the Divine Mother manifesting through all. And he saw that everything that we look at as a physical object as that same divinity, that pure consciousness, that same Divine Mother manifested in this invisible form. So let us stop here. If anyone would like to ask anything, we have a few minutes, otherwise we'll do our oddity.
So, it's not related to this. I'm asking a general question. When we say all is one, so I'm just trying to understand where does it put us with respect to the killing animals, or even as a vegetarian, right? You are eating something, a plant. Everything has life. Everything is same, right? So does that mean that killing someone is wrong, right, or it doesn't matter at all?
It depends on our point of view, of course. If we want to be very highly philosophical, there's no birth or death for the soul. that everyone will die anyhow. And then,
No, I'm asking it because the country I come from, there are even in 21st century questions about not killing the cow,
yes.
and all sacred kind of questions. And generations here, they are older than me or sitting here, they have seen it far more than me.
Yes.
So there have been always these questions about this, whether you need to be vegetarian, should not be non-vegetarian.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking questions.
Swamiji was a very practical person. He felt that those people who could lead a very quiet type of life, practice Raja Yoga, devote their time to meditation, that for them strict vegetarian diet was absolutely the best. Those who had to live in the world and had to fight and do hard work, that he would say, eat plenty of meat, my boys. He actually said that to Shara Chandra and everything. So it depends. And really this question of vegetarianism in India is a very regional thing and a very caste thing. It depends on the community and it depends on the part of the country. Those who are the higher the caste, the more the restrictions. The Brahmins were expected in the ancient times always to not only not have any, eat any non-vegetarian food, but no luxuries or anything, lead a simple life, not accept gifts, and all of that. So it very much depends. Those parts of India where they're next to the seashore, they eat fish. Right. North India, South India, doesn't matter. Right? So from one point of view, of course, this non-taking of life is a very high ideal. But it can be misused also. In the Buddhist communities, they don't mind if the Muslim butcher slaughters everything. They'll buy it from the butcher and eat it. But they'll never kill it themselves. So a little hypocrisy can be there also.
Yes, that's right.
That way. So these are personal things.
So if next time somebody asks me that if I eat non-veg, I shouldn't care, right? If there is no right or wrong to that.
Yeah, see, Swamiji himself said he wasn't vegetarian. He said, but I respect it and I recognize as a higher ideal. But he didn't come from that community. Ramakrishna wasn't vegetarian also. This is, in Bengal there wasn't much, only some of the Vaishnava communities, especially Chaitanya, his followers, there were strictly vegetarian. So a lot of it is regional in that way. But life lives on life.
Yes, because that's the nature, right? That's the degree of nature. Some animal will eat animals, other will eat plants, but all of them have
life lives on life that way. Yeah, but if we can manage without causing, especially, the higher the life form, where we see that the animal there is obviously can experience pain, can experience fear and everything, then of course we can make distinctions that way if we want to. The manifestation of consciousness can be a little greater because of the development of mind and different animals. We can make these types of distinctions if we want. But Swamiji himself and Sri Ramakrishna himself didn't put that much emphasis on these things. He said renunciation of fish and meat and things like that is not renunciation. He said renunciation of lust and greed is renunciation. That was one of his great statements that he made.
That's
a
big topic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But still, we respect those people who are strict vegetarian. I myself take fish. I like it. And our devotees like to serve it. But those who follow the vegetarian diet, of course, we respect them. That they're putting the principles into practice and practicing ahimsa and everything. So it is a high ideal, there's no question about that.
I have a question now. So people who attain that super consciousness or the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, so they can recall all their past life. How do you call past life?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We don't hear about this at all with any of the direct disciples, except Swamiji makes that one statement. And in fact, almost the opposite. Say with Swami Brahmananda, that it wasn't until on his deathbed that he seemed to have some recollection of when he was a companion of Sri Krishna, what Ramakrishna had said about him. And not that he remembered any of the others in between or anything like that. It's a very rare thing. There's some people it's more of a psychic thing, or even some they claim they can do past life therapy and things like that and bring these things back. It's stored somewhere in the deep subconscious or in this Mahakasha somewhere, who knows where it's stored someplace. So theoretically it could be accessible, but it's not the case that everyone will. This is one theory that we find that before attaining liberation, that in order to have this, to remove every last possible desire to experience anything again, to be reborn, one will remember all of the different lifetimes and say enough, no more. It's a theory, but we don't find it happens very much.
Yeah, in fact, in Gita also Sri Krishna said, I had many lives. I can remember.
I remember all of them. You don't remember any of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is it like only human life or animal life as well? Like that question always
The
comes to my
Jataka
mind.
tales go to all different animal incarnations also. We don't know these things. How much will we remember of living an animal life if we lived one?
Yes, that's what.
Yeah.
That question always comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For yellow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We'll have our.